Today we're going to take a look at our first three comma rules. I found that for most people, commas are troublesome. We tend to either use them everywhere or we don't use them at all. So I'm happy that we're going to have this first grammar lesson on the comma so that you will be set for whenever you write your narrative essay. I started for this lesson the first three pretty basic rules that you'll probably all remember. And as we go through, I think I'm going to make two more screencasts of this, and we'll work up to the two that are the most troublesome and I feel the most important to use for clarity. But today, if you notice, that the first comma rule that we're going to take a look at is commas are used in numbers, dates, addresses, and letters. And I have two examples for you here. The first states, my son was born February 2nd, 1978, in Lexington, Kentucky, during a snowstorm. Always keep in mind that when you are looking at the month and the day, they stay together as one unit. Should never have a comma separating February and the number 2. So we have February 2nd, comma, and then the year. If I were to end this sentence here, I would have my period. But I've written more in this sentence. So after the year, I also have in Lexington, Kentucky during a snowstorm. Therefore, when I have more left to my sentence, I put a comma after the year and I continue writing. In Lexington, Kentucky, notice you always separate the city, Lexington, from the state, Kentucky, with a comma. If I were going to end my sentence after Kentucky, I would have my period, but I'm still writing more to this sentence. So because I am, I also need a comma after my state. So Lexington, comma, Kentucky, comma, during a snowstorm. Another area where some people tend to get a little bit mixed up is when we are writing an address. This particular sentence reads, the address for our school is Pittsburgh Technical Institute, comma, 1111 McKee Road, comma, Oakdale, comma, PA, comma, and we are really fortunate to have a lot of land to grow. Notice the name of the institution stays together, Pittsburgh Technical Institute. Or if you were writing a person's name and giving their address, the person's name would stay as one, first name, last name. After the name of the institute or the person, we use a comma. Next, we have the number of the building or house, and then the name of the street. They stay together as one unit. 1111 McKee Road stays as one unit, just as though if you had a house number 105 Spring House Drive, that would stay together as a unit. So after my number of my building and the name of my road, I use a comma. Then I have my city with a comma, the state, PA, and if I were going to stop the sentence there, obviously I would have a period. But I'm going to continue to write more to this sentence. So because I am, after the name of the state, I use a comma and I continue on with my sentence. Again, very basic material, but again, a little bit of a refresher so that when you have some exercises dealing with this, you will know exactly what to do. The second comma rule I want to talk about today, this one, I'm sure you learned this, I bet, in 3rd grade in elementary school. Rarely do students or does anyone make an error with these, but again, for a little review, commas are used to separate items in a series. They can be single words, they can be short phrases, they can be long phrases. But when we are writing, remember, most of the time our reader is not near us, and they cannot ask us what we mean if they become confused. Therefore, the way we write our sentences, the way we use punctuation is very, very important for clarity to our reader. The first example that I have, I am separating just single words. My favorite colors are green, comma, blue, comma, yellow, comma, and purple. Because these are single words and they're not very long words, I have my comma in between each. But notice the word and. It's called a conjunction. Textbooks are in disagreement with this. It seems as though different authors have different preferences. But what we have here, after the color yellow, I have a comma and I also use the conjunction and to separate the color yellow from purple. Some books say to do this to make sure that it is very, very clear. Other textbooks will say, don't do it for single words. It's not necessary. The and is strong enough to separate them on its own. Just use a comma and the and if the items in a series that you are separating are phrases, longer phrases. This is up to you, but keep in mind if you don't put the comma there, it should just be that you are separating small words. Generally, my own preference for myself is that I do use the comma, just to make sure that it is clear and there's no mistake to the reader that I'm separating one item from another. Our second example, we have some phrases that we're separating, phrases in a series. Notice it's Bill stretched out on the swaying hammock, one thing that he did, comma. Second thing, popped open a can of frosty beer, comma. And the third item, and balanced it carefully on his stomach. Notice I have phrases, not single words that I'm separating. Therefore, I'm going to separate every one of my phrases with a comma, including this last one where I have and also, making sure that I'm very, very clear. The third rule that I want to discuss with you today is the use of the comma when they are used to set off direct quotations. The samples that I have chosen today, they all have the same content. It's just that sometimes when we write a direct quote, we put our quote at the beginning of the sentence. Sometimes when we write, we put it at the end. Sometimes when we write, we split it up and put the speaker right in the middle. So I want to show you how to do this all three ways. Now you are going to be writing your narrative essay, and some of you might decide to use a little bit of dialogue in that narrative. When you have the character speaking, you need to put their words, their exact words that you want them to say, in quotation marks. So you will need to use this format. Also, when you all move into Comp 2, perhaps next quarter, you are going to be writing research papers. And when you write research papers, they are going to ask you to use sources to back up the material or to back up your view. If you decide to use a direct quote in that research paper, you're going to have to put commas around it. So let me show you the three variations of writing a direct quote. And this first one, and as I said, the content is the same. It says, the supervisor yelled to the teenagers, "If I catch you here again, you will be reported to the school principal." Generally, when we are writing a direct quote, we are separating what we call the speaker from the direct quote. And I know it's a speaker because it's the supervisor and he yelled, or maybe he said, or he shouted, or whatever. But this is my speaker and I want to identify him and tell what he did. He yelled. I want to separate the speaker from the direct quote by the use of a comma. So I say, or I write, the supervisor yelled to the teenagers, comma. Now I want to write exactly what he yelled. I use my quotation mark. If I catch you here again, you will be reported to the school principal. Period, quotation mark. Do you notice that I have the direct quote surrounded by quotation marks, but when I end the sentence, my period is coming inside the quotation mark. Inside. It comes after principal, and then I use the quotation mark. 99.9% of the time, your punctuation, whether it's a comma or a period, will go inside the quotation mark. In a later lesson, I will tell you whenever it does not. But if you're ever unsure, I would err on that side and place my punctuation inside the quotation mark. Second example, again, it's the same content, but this way I decided to write my quote first and then identify my speaker. So because I'm writing the quote first, I say quotation mark. If I catch you here again, you will be reported to the school principal. Comma, because I'm separating the quote from the speaker. But do you notice after principal, it's comma, quotation mark. Yelled the supervisor to the teenagers, period, at the end. Also notice that these quotation marks, they face inward. It surrounds the quote. If you have them facing the other way, you let a space enter in between there So make sure that they are facing inward, they're surrounding the direct quote. The third variation is sometimes we place our speaker smack in the middle of the direct quote. We split the quote. So what I have here is quotation mark. If I catch you here again, comma, quotation mark, I'm closing it up, and here's my speaker. Yelled the supervisor to the teenagers, comma, I'm going to open my quote again. You will be reported to the school principal. I use my period to end the sentence, and then I place my quotation mark. Do you notice, because this direct quote, it's not two separate direct quotes, I split it up. The second part does not start with a capital Y. I'm just continuing it. Do you notice that I separated the speaker from both parts of the quote with commas? When it comes after the quote, the comma goes inside the quotation mark. I have my speaker, I have the comma, I open up my quote with the quotation mark, I end it, I place my period there, and I close it again with my quotation mark.